Good morning, good day, good afternoon, good night, wherever and whenever you're listening to this. Welcome to today's Town Hall session. We are writing the Town Hall number 30. What an achievement we have here. This is some nice numbers of being your host here. I'm One Clue, I'm your today's host, and it's lovely to be here, and it's lovely to get you guys rolling and get you up on new news, whatever is going on there. Before we do start, I'd like to quickly point out, whenever you guys have any questions, these town halls are usually for you. So if you do have any questions, feel free to hop in here, ask your question in the chat, or raise your hand so that I recognize this and can you bring up on stage. If you don't want to be on stage, because everything said on this town hall here is been recorded and uploaded later on, just don't raise your hand and ask your question in the chat. With that, I think we can start into this. Hey Scott, how are you doing?
What's up, One Clue? Buddy, how you doing?
Man, a couple of people are probably wondering why the heck is Town Hall today so late? Well, let me tell you, I did another Bitaxe workshop today, and driving on the German Autobahn is sometimes not as fast as you do think.
What? You weren't going like, 120 kilometers an hour?
Well, that's considered slow and a traffic jam.
Is that what is like what's like top speed?
The top speed that I ever drove on the German Autobahn
Yeah.
are probably something like 350.
350.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I gotta convert that. All right,
I,
350.
I mean,
217 miles an hour. That's really fast. What kind of car were you in?
I was a friend of mine was just booking for a weekend a Lamborghini and was like, well, let's hit the Autobahn. And I was like, well, okay, if it is free, let's do that. And I need to tell you, I never ever want to experience this again. It was horrific.
Wow.
I,
Well, I
60 miles an hour, 70, 80 miles an hour, totally fine. That's like chill speed of going on the Autobahn. Anything above that, I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. Well, it sounds like you were in traffic, so
Yeah, a little bit,
that
but
traffic sucks no matter where you are.
yeah, definitely. But good thing is I onboarded around 8 new plebs because there were 8 plebs attending to this workshop today, and we saw that a little bit on Bitaxes. We got like a rough understanding of how mining works and what is going on, why we as Open Source Miners United even exist. So we do have a couple new people who are tuning in into this whole movement of Open Source Miners United.
That's badass. That is really cool. Like this is the way. Getting more people out there, getting them comfortable. Like it's hard to build a Bitaxe or your own circuit, but it's doable.
What I
So
what I
getting
do
people
think
trying to
is
do it
really
is rad.
amazing is like usually people that are attending to my workshops are between, and I don't want to be rude or anything, but I do find this interesting. Usually I don't have young people in these workshops. Usually these people are between like 40 and 70, which is
Okay.
interesting
All
to
right.
me.
Yeah, I mean the us old guys, we grew up like making electronics with kits and I don't know. I didn't do it, but those guys probably screw around with their ham radios and stuff, right? They have they have the desire and maybe the knowledge that you can do it. You can mess around with electronics.
Yeah, probably. I mean, all of them were really interested, and it was amazing to see. What I usually do is when I do start these workshops, I have like usually some sort of a 5 to 20 minute presentation, but I'd like to start up these workshops with a quick get around and get to know each other. So I do ask them, what is your take on Bitcoin? How much experience do you have? What exactly do you know? So just give us a brief overview. And then usually the people reply with what they do know. And yeah, well, then we do start into it because then I do have a better understanding of what I need to tell them and in what kind of form I need to tell this to them. We do have a question in the chat here asking if my workshops are online or in real life. Well, all of them are in real life. So that's the reason why this town hall is late, because I was driving on the German Autobahn and I was in traffic jam.
Well, we're glad you made it. even if you weren't going 300 miles an hour.
No, no, not at all. My car is not capable of doing that. I'm more of the chill drivers, like on the right lane, chilling.
Chilling.
Yeah, well,
That's all right. Because you've got Bitcoin. You know it's gonna be all right. You can chill.
it's gonna be all right. Well, the most famous words, I haven't said them today. God bless you and fuck Lucky Miner. Thanks for being here.
Yes. There we go. Our new motto.
Apparently, we do have. I don't want to drag this into a town hall, but apparently, we do have a couple of people who don't like it that we brag. No, bragging is the wrong word, but that we dislike or hate on all these closed source and proprietary software things. Well, mate, I need to tell you, everybody who is not on the same course as we are and thinks proprietary hardware or software or copying open source products and making them proprietary is okay, I'm gonna need to say you fuck off. I don't want to talk to you. That's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, we've got over 7,000 people and probably a lot of bots that are on this Discord, and so there's going to be a lot of different opinions. But I would say that if you are not into open source mining, probably also Bitcoin specific, open source Bitcoin mining, if you're not into that, you're just in the wrong place. And at best, you should probably find someone else who's interested in talking about your lucky miners. And I think there's a non-zero amount of people that are trying to promote Lucky Miner and are in here because we have a lot of people, a big audience. So, yeah, that's not cool. It's not welcome here. Sorry.
Yeah, well, let's move on. This topic is not worth a single minute.
Yeah.
We do have a question. Is it true that more terahash per second does not matter to find a block? Like an Avalon Q has 90 terahash a second and it has like roughly 160 chips. Well, now we're getting into a sort of, I'd say like a rough question, because this question is into stochastics. Like the more terahash, the more hash rate you have, the higher is your likelihood of actually finding a solution to the next block. And it doesn't matter if you do have more terahash per second to find a block. If you do have 1 terahash per second, you do have a chance of finding a block, but you can increase this chance by just having more ASICs doing the same thing, like trying to find the next solution.
Yeah, it's more hash rate means you have a higher chance of solving a block. It's like if there is a lottery and you want to win, you can increase your chances by buying more tickets. That's what getting more hash rate is.
And by the way, while we're talking about this, today I got a really good question. Somebody was asking me like, well, one clue, tell me, people are usually telling me that if you do solo mine, it does not provide anything to the network. And usually I do reply with, well, that is correct, basically in all terms. But then people are asking me, well, don't I contribute to the network difficulty or stuff like this? And I wanna quickly get you into this topic as well, because I do think some people don't know this, but if you do mine Bitcoin and you do not create something on the blockchain, such as a new block, then basically you do not provide anything. Sure, you provide hash rate, but when it comes, for example, to the network difficulty, this only gets adjusted on valid and found blocks. If you do not find a block in a 2-week period, your not found block or your hash rate will not count into the blockchain difficulty. If you do not find a block in general, you can say you don't provide anything to the network. But what you do provide is definitely some more decentralized hash rate, and maybe you're the lucky one who's actually finding a block in the next 10 minutes. So I think it's worth the hassle that we do have these mini miners that are capable of just being plugged in at home. But when you consider it, do we actually provide anything? The answer, to be clear and to be open here, is no. As long as you don't have anything provided to the network, you will not actually provide anything.
My friend and I guess colleague at this point, Rob Warren, Bikes and Bitcoin on Twitter, published an article yesterday arguing that basically that, like, if you're not solving blocks, you are not providing anything to Bitcoin. Yeah, exactly. Midwest Chris. I mean, yes, right. If you're not solving blocks, you are technically not sending anything to the network. Like, you do not provide any data, any proof of work to the network. But it is important to remember that the network difficulty is calculated, is a measure. Oh, Ben's got it. Ben's,
Yeah,
you got a comment on this?
you can go ahead. I just wanted to comment on this because actually I disagree with his argument on that, and I'll go into that as to why.
Oh yeah, this
Yes,
was
I
really an
also
interesting
disagree.
thing. I mean, we do get it. We know why we do this here. We know why we do provide hash rate. And I do think it's quite interesting to talk about this because technically speaking, when we do speak about the difficulty, it is sort of true, but there's more to it. You can't just solely say, well, you're a solo miner, you're not finding a block, you don't provide anything. That, in my 2 cents, is not the correct answer here.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
I
think
think you do provide something for the network, right? It like Midwest Chris says, every block is found by a single hash, a single chip. So, what are you trying to tell me that your whole like farm of exahashes is not doing anything? No, of course it's
No.
not. It's all contributing hash rate, and that just increases your chances of finding a block. You're absolutely contributing something to the network, because when we adjust the difficulty, we're going to take into account how fast blocks are found. More hash rate means blocks are found faster.
I think there's on his part, when I was reading the article, it seemed like maybe there was some confusion around like probabilities, statistics, and there's something that I don't quite know like how to express, but it's kind of similar like Schrodinger's cat, right? Where just because like there's a single instance of Schrodinger's cat being like dead or alive, doesn't mean that in like some other area that the statistical probability was in their favor and they did find blocks. So just basically just having the opportunity, statistical opportunity to find a block contributes the hash rate to the network, even if you yourself don't find like are not lucky enough to find the block in the first place. Because if like everyone who didn't find a block stopped hashing, there would be less blocks found. But you can't. It's kind of like those weird things where you can't look at it in like the past tense. You have to look at it as in like the future probabilities. Because if you look at it in the past tense, it's like, well, anyone who's ever not find a block is like, hasn't contributed anything. But that's not really true. You have to like look forward in the future and look at things from like a statistical probability standpoint, not of like whether or not they found one in the past.
Yeah. Weird Robot is writing something good in the chat. Like, he's saying you're contributing to the competition, which I do agree on. Sure, well, statistically, you're not contributing to the network's difficulty because you haven't solved the block, so therefore it will not be measured into this 2-week period. But definitely, you're contributing to the competition. So therefore, I think that's a good argument here.
Also think if you expand your time frame long enough, you will solve a block. Like a single Bitaxe will solve a block given a long enough time frame, and that will contribute to the network. So we're essentially like taking a limit here.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I don't think you can look at it like in a past tense, right? You can't say, oh well, they didn't solve a block. You have to look into it in the future and say, well, could they solve a block? I think that's what adds the network security, not like what actually did happen.
So there you go. There you go. That's why my response to him was Bitaxe and chill.
Yeah, well, that's great things here to talk about. Also, guys, remember, always, if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them. I can't point this out often enough because, of course, these town halls lately do have the trend to be more of like news, 1 hour of news of like what's going on in the open source ecosystem. But it's also a little bit more into it of like asking and responding to your questions that you do have, because we want to make sure that you are on track with things that are going on. I mean, today myself, I found out in this workshop that I did that even though sometimes I do think something is trivial, for example, setting up your Bitaxe, most of the people that are in here would agree with me that it is trivial. But imagine or think back, what was your first time setting up your Bitaxe? Probably you had some trouble or you needed some guidance or something like that. And one of the attendees today was asking for some sort of a handout where I've written down the stuff. And the only thing I could do was point him over to the osmu.wiki and tell him, well, I created a PDF. It's a little bit outdated, but the steps are basically the same. Just follow them. It's quite interesting. You try to do so much, but then you sometimes forget about people that are not really that into it. And you oversee stuff because you are used to it daily.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I mean, we're wearing a lot of hats here, right? We're trying to decentralize and open source Bitcoin mining by getting a shit ton of Bitaxes and other projects out there. But to do that, we need lots of people building them. So that means that the education side is important. Anyone who has skills in this area and wants to sort of write guides and how-to videos and things, like, definitely be welcome to contribute that kind of thing. We could certainly use it. I mean, also, huge shout out to Wanklu, who's made probably more educational videos and information than anyone as far as these projects go. So, yeah.
Well, there's a lot more
to do.
Check out
Wanklu's YouTube.
Thanks for that. But there's way more to do on this end. I do have a whole list of things I want to show and explain on short videos and stuff like this, so more people do get it what we're talking about here and how to use all these sorts of things that we do have, because it's not only Bitaxe. Like, this community is about all these open source miners that we do have. And I started a whole new series about the NerdQX thingies, so that we also onboard more people onto these ones, because they're getting more and more popular these days. So there's also need for that, and people need to know what's going on with these things. I
think the Nerd QX is still much larger components too, so that might be an easier one to put together.
Oh yeah, definitely. So maybe worth another soldering tutorial of myself freaking out on how to solder stuff.
Is there maybe we need to go back and make a single chip Nerd QX. I feel like soldering a multi-chip miner together as your first one is going to be a recipe for disaster, but.
Well, it is tough. We do have, for example, the project EcoMiner, which got sponsored by OSMU with donating ASIC chips over to it. And if I'm not mistaken, the EcoMiner does use 8 chips or so. And he's doing great progress on it, but we also do see, well, it's really tough, and he's also pointing this out. It's really tough for him to actually make sure that all these components align correctly and everything is all right. And well, the more ASICs you add to it, the harder it gets, I'd say.
Yeah, you're just increasing your chances of breaking one, and those chips aren't cheap. And yeah, I mean, I highly recommend starting with a single chip miner. Like Midwest Chris says, a multi-chip miner will break a guy. It is.
I'd say the best one on this one would be the Pi miner.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good way to go.
It's 0805 components, and it's working flawless. I think PMax he's still running his, I believe. It's running on 12 volts. It's basically a head for a Raspberry Pi, so definitely worth to check out. It's probably not as modern looking, or does not really have like a modern looking UI. You need to get used to a little bit of using your command line. I know plenty of people are a little bit freaked out if it goes into this section. But well, when it comes to soldering and testing stuff out, this one is a great one to start.
For sure. That uses the 1366?
Yeah, correct. The Pi miner does use the 1366.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a good way to go. It's like everyone's like, oh yeah, I want to have like a big, like multiple terahash miner, but it's like, all right, you can do that after you master a single chip one, because it's hard, especially the chips.
I mean, the good thing is, and maybe it's just me, but when I started with it, I saw that on a live stream with you, and I'm not sure, was it developer algo on the stream with us? Because I do remember I got a unit from him back in the days, and then I was trying to sort out, oh, it was Jonathan from Decentral, I don't know. But I tried to sort out the Beam 1397, and this one was quite easy to do. Then the 1366 was also basically same level, but as soon as we hopped over to the 68, this one was a little bit tough. I don't know why, and they tend to break while you're air mailing them. I don't know, probably because of temperature differences and stuff like this. And the 1370, this one is also a little bit tough to solder, but you need to get used to it. And these older chips tend to be a little bit easier when it comes to aligning them.
What we should do is, I mean, I've always wanted to do this, but it'd be cool to make like a big, like Arduino hat or shield or whatever they call them with like a 1380 on it, the S9 chip, right? They're cheap. They're basically like going to be free chips. You know, it's not too hard to get a hold of them. If you break it, no big deal. But have like a big shield. You put an Arduino on there. I think you could probably use the NerdMiner firmware, modified maybe with an Arduino to mine to this like large shield that has big 0805 components on there. Maybe like separate just modules for voltage regulator. I think that'd be pretty cool to do. It's just not going to be very exciting because you're not going to have a very high hash rate miner when you're done. But if you want to like learn soldering and be successful in a reasonable amount of time, something like that would be a lot easier.
Yeah, definitely. It's just another project that somebody needs to get working on. There are so many things to do. And while we're talking about this and contributing in general to different things, I quickly wanted to point out here to Cryptize, because he was pointing out a bug to me on the web flasher, which I was not aware of. Apparently, for a amount of weeks, you were able to basically flash an empty file to whatever device you were connecting to it, because I missed the flag where you need to select the board, the model number, and the firmware version. But for whatever reason, I missed a flag on the firmware version, so you were able to actually flash an empty version onto your device. And thanks for doing that. Thanks for pointing that out. This bug, we quickly fixed it together. That was nice.
Awesome.
And see, guys, that's the awesome part about it. Even if you're not into like coding or hardware design, you can still try to be as contributive as possible and just point out bugs or stuff like this. We even do have like a bug bounty with a program on it. So if you do find bugs that are interfering, for example, with mining or with the UI or general bugs, you also will get like a bug bounty for it. The rules that we do have there are, I'd say, pretty clear, that you need to be able to point it out and to be able to resolve it. But yeah. Well, Ben, what are you showing us there? We're seeing a hashboard here. Looks like an S21 Pro.
Yeah, I figured it'd take you guys along because I'm doing work right now, so it's something to look at.
So what are we looking at here?
This is a F21 Pro dashboard. Been doing this all day. Taking the chips off.
Are you cleaning off these chips afterwards you put them or got them off of the board? Like, are you cleaning off the pins?
Afterwards. Yeah.
I mean, I imagine it's quite a tedious task to do, right?
Yeah.
What do you have a heat gun on the top? Do you have a heater on the bottom too?
Yeah, there's a preheater under this.
Well, this is some experience, I'd say, like
heat gun?
live desoldering on the town hall.
Yeah. That's all it's done.
You got to make sure you don't get like sweep it to the side and accidentally get like a handful of like 0201 components stuck to the side.
Yep.
That's cool. Looks like it's moving along.
Well, it's going somewhere. Well, I mean, what's cool about this is obviously you can do it like Ben, do this manually by hand, but for example, over here in the European part, a partner of mine is working with a company together who are trying to do this autonomous with like a machine that is preheating these boards and then does have some sort of a suction cup and is taking off these chips one by one, which is also really mesmerizing to watch.
Midwest Chris, I've tried to do the heat plate method before, and it's insane. The thing turns into like a bowl. Like that whole hash brown just cup up into a bowl. It's madness. I mean, Ben's is probably warping as well.
It is warping a little bit, but you have to use an IR heater. You can't use a hot plate.
Yeah,
Otherwise
I tried to do a XP S19 XP back in the day with a hot plate, and it was just like it curved up into this bowl, and then I wasn't able to heat it up. I was like doing this crazy dance where I'm trying to rotate it so that whatever spot I'm trying to use is getting heated up. It was a disaster.
Scott, maybe you can give us some news on the Ember One. What's going on with that? The project of the 256 Foundation.
The Ember One project, man. I've been working really hard on this lately, so I've been sort of neglecting some of the other projects. But the Ember One, it's coming along. I mean, I've got a board. I'm hashing. It's working. I'm able to mine on it. I have a problem. I've got a 100-watt voltage regulator on it that steps down 12 to 24 volts to 3.6 volts, and it the issue that I was working on all last week is it's just I have like too much ripple on the output, or not actually ripple. There's a good amount of ripple, but there's these spikes that happen every time it switches. The switch mode regulator every time it switches, and it's like an interleaved design, so it just has more ripples. And unless I have to underclock the ASICs to mine. If I put it at its normal like 525 megahertz hash rate, I'll have too much noise. So I kind of like went back to a version I made that doesn't have any ASICs on it. It's just the voltage regulator, and I'm working on tuning that. Made a bunch of progress, got the spikes down from they were like almost 400 millivolts. It was insane. I got them down to more like 50, which is pretty good. So yeah, just kind of that mind melting analog electronics stuff, which I'm not really all that good at. So I'm kind of futzing around, but made a bunch of progress. The next step here is to rev my board again, tighten up all of the two switch loops to try and get the noise down there, and then add these changes. I want to add pads for an output filter with an inductor, like an LC output filter, to try and test that out. A lot of this testing is kind of tough because it's like I'm just trying to like air wire on components and like solder them where there's no actual footprint for it. So it's a little slow going, but made some progress. Early next week, I'll be revving that board, send it out, get a new one back, and hopefully get that noise down. But it was reassuring when I finally got all 12 ASICs soldered and got that chip ID response back from all of them. That was cool. That was good to see. It makes me, happy that at least that circuit is working. I had 2 bugs. There was one that kind of blew my mind, is the response input on the last chip in the chain actually needs a pull-up. I haven't noticed that on any of the Bitaxes, but certainly on these 1392s, it will not work at all unless that's there. So that took me a while to figure that out. I had just like bonehead mistake. I had just, K1, that's right. I think I do want to actually add pull up at least a spot for it on every board. I think it makes sense because you want to have that response. You want to have that line sort of idle high. Pull up for the RX line. Yeah, it's a pull for the RX line, but it's the input to the chip. So on a Bitaxe, we only have one chip. That means that the response input to that chip would be where this pull-up goes. Yeah, fun stuff. It's coming along. I mean, if you're following along, I've got it all on GitHub. You can see the issues. You can see my fixes, the kind of things that are outstanding. You can try and build one yourself if you want. It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool.
Have you solved your bus bar issue?
My what issue?
Your bus bar issue.
No, actually, I haven't.
Okay.
Yo, you want to pull some of those off for me?
Yeah, there's some for you.
I sized it to use the bus bars off of the J Pro because that's where the chips come from too. So there's spots for the J Pro bus bars, which aren't quite as fancy as those ones.
I've also seen some of these bus bars. Some of them do have like this warp in them where they're a little bit bent, and some are not, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, that S21 looks like it's got really fancy ones. I think every now and then there's one that has a little bridge in it for some traces to go underneath.
These ones, some of the other S21 models do that.
Oh yeah, for traces. Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, it does. I mean, it's quite interesting. Also, when it comes to the general noise of like the Bitaxe and all these other ones, it's quite interesting how things are going. I'm wondering, like the Bitaxe itself is basically designed to be this sort of, you can even call it like a development board where you just faffle around with it. But when it comes to like being actually a product that you can sell in masses, like obviously we are already selling in big quantities. All these manufacturers around the globe that are making a buck off of it are selling Bitaxes and all these other products that we do have. But I do believe, like when it comes to electromagnetic compatibility, or however you do pronounce it, it's way more complicated getting all these things sorted out and making sure that everything is aligned and nothing creates too much noise and stuff like this. You certainly need a degree for that.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, usually it involves paying a lab to test it, like in an anechoic chamber. And then there's, depending on what country you're in, there's like different rules for how much radiated noise it can have at a given frequency. And if you're dealing with a good lab, they'll have some tricks of the trade to decrease the noise if it's too high in one area. I mean, certainly one of the areas you could have a problem with is the switching frequency of the voltage regulator or harmonics of that. And there are, as I've been learning this week, I mean, there's lots of things you can do to reduce noise there. The sort of downside is you lose efficiency. I think just being noisy as all hell is very efficient, or not very efficient, but some of the tricks to reduce noise decrease the efficiency as well. But I thought Bitronics, didn't they got the CE certification in the EU for the Bitaxe Supra, or maybe the Gamma?
I think for the Supra maybe, but I mean, labs are different from country to country. For example, CE is self-declarable. That's correct, K1. You can self-declare the CE certificate, but you can also pay like a lab to do a quick check so that you actually do have something in there that is with proof. You can say it like that. But
FCC Part 15 is also self-declarable. That's the radiated emission, that's the one where it's like you're not specifically an RF emitter. Like that would be the sort of the radiated noise. That one is there you go, unintentional radiator. That one's self-declarable. I mean, they just want you to say, yes, we're conforming to the rules. And of course, if you just say that and you're not, someone could come back and sue you or fine you or whatever.
Yeah.
In the US, we have like these like just lawyered up like nanny groups that will just test this and sue you just so they can get money.
I mean, it's
Watchdog
quite
group, maybe.
interesting talking about this because we do have, for example, for the Bitaxe Gamma, a company got sued, and the Bitaxe Gamma apparently fails the rules here over in Europe.
Oh, really? Who was that?
Yeah, I'm not trying to disclose that here, but well,
Oh.
yeah, it's quite a thing, and I tried to get myself involved in this, that we sort out what exactly is messing around on this board, and potentially also a couple other boards as well. And maybe there needs to be some sort of a knockoff Bitaxe, I don't know, something like Bitaxe EU or something like that, where we do have filters on the board or stuff like this to make sure that we align with the rules that are applied over in Europe. But well, yeah, it seems like it's failing on that end. But well, it's early in the process, so
Well, I mean, if they want to share with me, I'd be happy to take a look at it. I haven't been through that process on the Bitaxe, but I have done it for other products. So yeah, let me know. It'd be interesting to know what exactly they're failing, like at what frequency and by how much.
yeah,
See if we can
I'll make
address
sure
it.
to share that with you later on, so that we can work this out. 'Cause thing is, like, it is such a nice product, we can't fail on something like that. And the biggest issue, the biggest fear I have is if you want to apply to all rules all over the globe, it's gonna be either more components, aka more expensive, or other things. Because I myself, I'm not into hardware. You know that. I'm barely learning KiCad these days. It is a tremendous amount of work for me, but when it comes to this, I do understand well there's a rule and we're failing this on this end. So yeah, well, something needs to be done.
Yeah, we can take a look for sure. I mean, it is not impossible to basically certify a device globally. I think there's not that many agencies, and there's going to be rules of thumb like, oh, here's the sort of limits that you need to abide by to sort of be certifiable globally. I don't think it's impossible. I think we can do it, and certainly if it's like preventing sellers in certain parts of the world from selling it, then it seems worth doing. So, yeah, let me know. We could definitely get it done.
All right, while Ben is still desoldering ASICs here, which is looking lovely, I think we can move on to a little bit of another topic, which more tends into the news and what's going on. A couple of people are already questioning, like, what's going on? Where's the next Bitaxe update? Well, guys, we do have plenty of updates coming along. Plenty of things are still needed to be implemented. The current goal is that we're currently using something like milestones, because Scott pointed it out that we probably should use something like milestones. I'm trying to be a little bit more into this end and make sure that we do have milestones for specific things we want to add in, for example, API versioning or the next version, the next release, version 2.6.0. For this version, I try to make it due to the end of March. So I'm really looking forward for it. There are only a couple things that we need to address and put into the next release, and then we can definitely ship this out. Scott, have you made any progress on the TPS? Because you were pointing out that we still need to do a little bit of work on that. I know I've seen that you have created the new branch for the TPS.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really busy the last 2 weeks, I guess, on Ember One stuff. But I did take, I think, 2 days and worked on this TPS 546 issue. I think what we're seeing is that devices that have the TPS 546, so the Gamma and some of the Supras, that voltage regulator, it has these thresholds, and it will shut itself down if either the input or the output of the voltage regulator exceed those thresholds. And so we're setting those in a lot of cases to specific values. But what we're not doing is paying attention to if one of those thresholds has been hit. I call them faults. So I think what's happening in this growing list of people that are seeing their Bitaxe go down to like 5 watts and not hashing is that for some reason that one of those voltage regulator faults has been hit. And I think in these cases, people see that resetting their Bitaxe either via the button on the side or via AxOS doesn't fix the problem. And that makes sense if my theory is correct, because resetting the ESP32 does not currently reset the voltage regulator. So I added some code in there to reset the voltage regulator and these faults at startup. It's kind of unclear to me if that's actually fixing this problem. One of the tough things here is I haven't been able to reproduce the problem myself, so I can't actually test this. Kakawala, he was able to make the problem happen by just kind of like fiddling with his barrel power connector, which makes me think that he was hitting the input over voltage fault, or maybe under voltage. It's it's a little bit of a tough one because I can't reproduce it. So I don't know if what I'm doing is actually solving the problem. So I put in some code in the ESP miner to reset the TPS 546 on restart. I also put in some code to print out the status register that would indicate if there's any of these faults, and to kind of monitor that. That's what's going on in that branch that I made. So I think, one of the things that we can do, and this needs to be added to AxOS, so something sort of a bar in there or a banner, a header in there that would say like, your voltage regulator has shut down due to a fault. Click here to restart.
Yeah, that could make sense. So
This problem. But if there's people that are running into this all the time, that's still going to be really annoying for them.
well, I mean,
If you want to test it, I can tell you from experience, just short V out and it'll fault.
Short V out and a fault. Okay, that'd probably be the overcurrent fault. So, what do we do in that case? Like that's kind of an interesting problem. So we have a Bitaxe where the output is shorted. And, it would be nice to have the voltage regulator just immediately turn off, right? It'll save your Bitaxe from exploding if that voltage regulator immediately shuts off. But now what do we do? I think the thing to do is to show that fault in AxOS. And then, the user can do with it. They can probably, it's like the warning light in your car, right? Like something's gone wrong.
I'm sorry. I mean, I think you probably treat it almost exactly like the overheat stuff. Like if you're getting these faults on the TPS, like something needs to change. Something critical happens that needs your attention.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. And so that, is what I'm missing, is that sort of UI aspect of it that treats it like the overheat mode, and switching into that mode. I think that I would like to have that in there for this 5.6.0 release.
You also need to decode your fault codes.
And we need to get it out there and get it testing, because like I said, I can't reproduce it, although I guess I can try just shorting V out like Ben says. That's a good idea.
I mean, well, some of these PSUs do behave a little bit weird. That's something I've noticed, definitely. And as you said, Kagawa was able to reproduce this issue just by wiggling around his power connector, which indicates to me that either the diameters of the PSU connector or the diameters of the Bitaxe plug are incorrect or incompatible with each other, and therefore the connection is not well suited, I'd say. But then,
I wiggled mine a ton. I don't know what to say. I wiggled it so much, and I couldn't get this to happen. I did connect it up to my adjustable power supply, and I can dial the voltage down and make it happen. Unfortunately, that's just the v-in faults. I think I need a better way to test the v-out faults. So
But
I'll rig up something to like short it, I guess.
I mean, as soon as you're done with the alerts, I can make like either a banner or a toast or something which is more appealing and probably all the way and always there if a fault appears or an alert, and then we have it ready to ship. So
Well, check out that branch. I mean, it's all there. I have the monitoring in the system or the power management task. So that loop in there is monitoring for these things. Um,
by the
and
way,
so I think
I
that's where
noticed
overheat mode
something.
is connected, right? Is in the power management task.
Yeah, while we're talking about this, I was noticing while you removed and moved some stuff from the power management task over to the to the power.c, that you apparently missed out on the current that we do
I
expose
saw
to the.
that. I saw that. Were you able to figure out what I had done?
Yeah, I already created a pull request. I will just merge it in a couple of seconds. I requested a review from you, but you're probably too busy for that. So this will be moved into it in a couple of minutes after this town hall, because it was I just basically put in a new task or a new function into the Power C. It's trivial. It's just one function.
Okay, cool.
And
Thanks.
yeah, and I do see it. We still have plenty of things to do when it comes to some of these files that we do have. For months, I'm trying to figure out the best way how we can cut off the HTTP server. It is so big. And I think what I will try to do, not for the 260, but probably for the 261 or something like that, is to make sure that we do use all the CJSON API things that we do have in there, move it over to a complete new component instead of having everything in the HTTP server, because it's way too big. The same with the power management task. We still need to cut out so many things there. So yeah, there are plenty of things to do, but nevertheless, 260 and what we already do have in there is just so fantastic. So many new features, new improvements, better visual aspects of it in general, and way more granny proof.
I was trying to add support for the Gamma Turbo, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is madness. Like we have sort of chip specific and board specific details just strewn about the whole project. So that was kind of my motivation for moving all of that out and into a couple files. The idea being there is that if you want to add support for new hardware, there's only a couple things you have to add.
Yeah,
I think that's the right way to do
reason. That's the reason why PMax created his ESP miner version in C++, so that he does have a little bit more modules or modularity in there, and he doesn't need to do that much work that we need to do. But I think we are on the right track with trying to clean up the things and make sure that everything is in the correct spot. For example, I just rewrote the whole frequency transition thing. I got plenty of comments from plenty of people. They fixed all the stuff that was missing or just shady. And it's looking better. It's getting there. The frequency transition is nothing that the user actually was experiencing, because I don't know why exactly, but I was a little bit stupid when I put this into the ESP miner initially, where I just said, oh, all right, we only have the Bitaxe Supra, and I put it in there, and then we had the Bitaxe Gamma, and I was like, well, I will fix this later. I never fixed it, and now I got time to do it, and 12 files, changing all this shit, man, this is madness. I do agree with you, we need to make sure that we keep things as minimum as possible.
Yeah, I think that's right. Sort of limit the number of places where you have to add new things specifically for hardware. I saw Weird Robot was tackling the min and max voltage settings for AXOS. That's another spot where we need to move those functions over to like power.c or wherever the appropriate spot is. But for example, on the Bitaxe Gamma Turbo, that's 12 volts input. So the sort of like hard-coded 5-volt range we have in AXOS right now isn't going to work. So we need to have that be dynamically adjusted depending on the model number. And that model number change shouldn't go in the HTTP or any of those files, right? We don't have to be routing through there when we add new hardware.
Yeah, well, we need to have these inclusions of like, all right, I'm this function, I'm having this ASIC model, now send me over. Yeah, it's a little bit tough, especially with C. Like we are always like a little bit noisy, probably pointy over to C++. It would be easier on C++, but well, I'm not moving over. It is sometimes nice, and sometimes I'm crying a little bit silent inside when I do see that PMax is adding new stuff into his versions, and I'm like, well, that looks so easy. I want to do the same.
Well, yeah, I mean, there have been a couple motivated people who want to port ESP Miner over, but it hasn't happened yet. I feel like I don't have time to do it either. So
I mean,
until then,
technically,
get this,
technically, we could port the NerdX project over, but well, no, it's completely different story these days, and it does use completely different components, so that's probably more work than just trying to fix all the stuff that we do have and make sure that it works, and it is way more pleasing to read and to understand for new devs that are jumping onto this project. So, well, yeah, the conclusion of this is basically that 2.6.0 is currently planned, or not currently, it is planned for the end of this month. We should be able to resolve all the things that should go into the 2.6.0 release. We do have, or we try to utilize now milestones. With 2.6.0, we will also move over to a new repository position or directory. Like we will move over from the current location to the Bitaxe org location, and then with the version 2.6.1, everybody who's trying to update stuff will have it there. But the best part about GitHub is if you move a repository, it is just so easy, because even though you write in the whole the old name of a repository, it will redirect you to the new one, which is just amazing. A nice feature of GitHub, to be honest.
yeah, that is a really nice feature. That's really handy. That should make moving over to Bitaxe org a lot easier.
Yeah, so we do have, let's see, on the milestones, we have 6 open tasks that we still need to do. Some of them are critical bugs, some of them are minor bugs, some of them are enhancements. And as soon as they are ported and done, then we will have a way nicer and cleaner version 2.6.0.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one. I mean, we got lots of awesome new features. I think lots of people have been working really hard on a bunch of points. Cool stuff for ESP Miner and AXOS. So that's much appreciated. I want to like slow down the cadence of releases. I don't want to like discourage anyone from submitting new features and working on bugs and stuff like that. But I do want to slow down the cadence of releases a bit. I think we were kind of just doing it, like, oh, we've got a bunch of features, like let's just release something. But it is a big hassle for people to update, and so I don't want to like wear out our welcome there and ask people like to update every week. As excited as we are for these new features, I think that it makes sense to keep them to at most once a month. Just to make it easier for people to stay up to date. I mean, once a month is still kind of crazy for a release schedule, but I realize it's still early and we're doing, there's lots of stuff to be done. Of course, if we have a really big problem or a bug, like that CSurf exploit or something like that, we can just push an update right away to fix that. But as sort of the sort of improvements and milestone updates, I'd like to do that once a month.
Yeah, like milestone updates are something where like bigger changes are in there, but still, as you said, if you do have something that is crucial or definitely should be out there, it will go out there basically immediately because it's needed. I do see it I mean, one of the biggest things that we also do have to figure out in the foreseeable future, hopefully, is to reduce the files. Currently, we do have the ww bin and the ESP miner bin, and we really need to find a way how we can port this over to just one single file.
Yeah, TDB3 was looking into that. I think he got busy with another project. Didn't get to finish it, but it's a little bit tricky. I think because there's some gaps in the sort of the memory addresses. If I recall correctly, that was the issue, is that we have two files because they're not it's not a contiguous area in memory.
Yeah, that's correct, because we try to have the web UI stuff on one specific section on the memory, and then the whole basically backbone of it, like the mining functionality, is sitting on another location. It makes it a little bit hard. I do think it is possible. We just need to figure out how to do that, because none of us is actually working for Espressif. Would be nice if some of you is doing that and pointing out how to do that, but well, until we figure it out on our own, it will take a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That would be fantastic to have just one file, sort of just a pain, when you're updating your firmware to have to do two, and then of course people forget to do the second one, and they're like, why isn't this working? So yeah, that would make that process a lot easier.
Also, when it comes to what we've spoken about earlier a little bit, when it comes to the modularity and how to implement, like, for example, new hardware or remove hardware or stuff like this. Sure, one thing that we need to make sure is that we don't have too many places where you need to change code. But another thing is that we also are considering or trying to figure out is how to make it a little bit more modular. Like, for example, when you take a look on the C++ project of ESP Miner, which is running on the NerdX, NerdQX thingies, then you do see that you need to export a specific board number, and then only these specific board models, and then only these specific board model sections will be built. Everything else will be left alone. And moving into something like this would also increase the modularity of the whole project, but will also add overhead to it in some sort of way. So I think you do get it. It's quite a tedious task and quite an massive task to do, to figure out all these things. And for now, what most of us are doing is focusing on majority tasks that we need to focus and solve so that the user does have a seamless experience in general, and then also make sure that everything works in the best manner that is possible on these devices. And until we haven't finished with all these things, we are not really working on something that is just nice to have.
There was a cool feature. I know K1 and Mutatrum were talking about this, and I think Mutatrum got started and sent a PR on it, but it was the idea of moving the model number to these eFuse bits that we have. I thought that was a pretty cool idea. That would get rid of the need to have different firmware for all the different models, that we have those factory images that have the config set for the different models. This would make it so even a factory reset, we could have just one file for everything. One image would be pretty slick.
We do have a question from Sean. Could we add a simple pop-up dialog that triggers if a person updates one, then it pops up and asks if they want to update the other? Well, the issue is one thing. What I usually do tell the people is, if you do update your Bitaxe, update the www file first, and afterwards go for the esp-miner file, because the esp-miner file, if you do run an update on this one, it will trigger a restart of the device. So sometimes people update the esp-miner file first, then the device restarts, they try to immediately update the ww file, and now the update fails, it triggers, and the web UI is broken, and now they're confused. So I think maybe that's a good point. What I'll make sure is to move these two sections so that the www file update is the first one that you do see, and then the esp-miner is to the right. So just switch them so people think it's needed to update the www file first. Probably that's not a fix, but a good idea. And the issue is, that I tried to point out is here, if you do update the ESP-miner file and you want to have a pop-up, you need to have a variable that tells the device, hey, I updated my ESP-miner file, and you need to make sure it sticks while you restart the file. And this is tricky, especially if you do the update on the ESP-miner bin, because then you restart the device. We don't really want to have such a variable on the non-volatile storage, which is persistent through the restarts. But yeah, I think a logical order, as you said here, mid-rest, is the right thing to do for the user in the first place. And if it triggers too many people that they only update the ESP-miner file, then we need to think about an issue. Yeah?
There's a recovery image, I think, for ESP-miner. So that one is like, if you flash a new ESP-miner image on there and it won't boot, I think there's a recovery image. And so we have some safety there.
Yeah.
We actually have a recovery for the AxOS, for the www bin, but that's a totally separate mechanism. Some of you've seen that green and black screen, the recovery image, but yeah, I remember that's what TDB3 said is when he was looking into this, was that those recovery images get to be difficult when you're trying to have one file to do both of these, like to do them both at once.
I mean, a cool feature that I've seen is, and I think afterwards we also go into closing today's town hall, is that PMax was creating or was forking my web flasher and was creating a web flasher for all the nerd eggs and nerd QX stuff. And he figured out a way how to use the binary file, keep out a specific section on the binary, and then just port and flash this new binary with a section that is kept out to the device. So I basically copied his code over to the ESP miner or to the Bitaxe flasher. So if you go to flasher.bitaxe.org, you can flash your Bitaxe device just from the browser. You don't need to be a technician or anything else. Just plug it in via USB and flash the appropriate version to it. You do now have a small button or a small checkbox that you can check, which tells you keep configuration. If you check this box, then you can flash factory images to your Bitaxe and it will keep the configuration because it is porting out the configuration section on the memory of the ESP and just flashing all the other sections. Which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I mean, that is a different mechanism entirely for updating the firmware because that uses the bootloader. So you have a lot more control over what you do from the bootloader because you're not like actively running the firmware that you're replacing.
Yeah, you can definitely not reproduce this on doing it via OTA.
Yeah.
Because an OTA, basically, to give you guys a little bit of an understanding, is like you do upload something to a new section where like the new update is. This is basically like a second section on the device. And then as soon as this is done, there's a process starting in the background, which tells the device, well, here is my new section with the new firmware. Just copy it over to the old section and reboot. That's basically how this works in simple terms. It's a little bit more sophisticated than that, but it opens up issues that you need to be aware of if you want to try to do something like OTA updates and leaving out specific sections, because then you would need to play around with how OTA updates actually work on these devices. Well,
yeah, and I think also the www bin is quite a bit bigger.
Yeah, it's something like 3 to 4 megabytes.
So it's a lot bigger, but it's not as critical. It's easier to recover from that because that's not like the firmware that boots the device.
Yeah, that's also good to point out here. Even if your www file fails to upload and your Bitaxe is not showing you any dashboard or anything else, your miner is still running because technically your Bitaxe only needs the ESP miner bin to work.
Yeah, and the ESP miner bin has a recovery image for the web partition, right?
I'm not. I've never touched into the recovery section of it, so I don't know, to be honest.
That's that like all text, like green and black screen, I believe.
Midwest asks, is this some sort of protection for bad updates? That's why you do it that way. Well, as far as I do understand, these microcontrollers, such as the ESP32, if you want to be able to update something over Wi-Fi, you need to use this OTA functionality of it. And it's, from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Scott, is that's the way how OTA does work.
Yeah, that's I think that's correct. It's just this concept of like, if you're going to update over the air, you're running the program that you're updating at the same time. So you can't just replace it. Like when you're updating over USB, you're doing it from a bootloader. So there's separate code running so that you're not running ESP miner. You can just erase it and replace it with something new. But if you're trying to do it OTA, like from AXOS, like that code is running. It's running the web server that's updating. So you have to put it somewhere else in this other partition. And then once it's done, then you can reboot and switch to it.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly go into one last topic here. Crypto Eyes was asking for a little bit of updates on the BAP port. Well, my 2 cents to that is I haven't done any updates on the BAP port. I don't know any other dev who's working on the BAP port.
The idea of 12 volt or 5 volt via BAP port power. So the power on the BAP port is whatever VN is. So
Currently it's
on all the
5
Bitaxe,
volts.
5 volts.
Yeah.
When we switch to the Gamma Turbo, that'll be 12 volts, and probably all miners going forward will be 12 volts as well. It kind of depends. I think different people want to use the BAP port differently. Whether you want to pull power from there or do you want to power the Bitaxe from there. Right now, those traces are not thick enough to power the Bitaxe.
Yeah, they're too thin.
I suppose it could be in the future. I mean, I know that that's how Duncan likes to work, is to power the Bitaxe from the accessory. I think that's kind of a neat idea. I think we could probably support that. We would have to, I think K1 pointed this out earlier, we would have to switch the pins, because just one of those like 0.1 inch pins is probably not going to be enough for
Yeah, he said they're only
for
capable of
several
3
amps.
amps. Yeah.
Well, I guess if we're at 12 volts, then that's probably fine, actually. But yeah, those connectors kind of have a reputation for being terrible. So if we want to move towards that, we might have to change the BAP a little bit. I think for right now, you can use that to power your accessory, but it's going to be whatever VN is, right? We don't have the ability to, or probably the desire to add a separate voltage regulator to every Bitaxe to provide a consistent, 5 volts on, for example, on the 12 volt VN Bitaxes.
So, and last but not least, we do have a question from Sean. Any progress updates on the Bitaxe GT?
Man, it's really close. We're still doing a little bit of work on the heatsink. It takes a little bit of time to get the samples back because, as a reminder, the Gamma Turbo has a custom heatsink. We're sort of moving away from the little yellow one that's on the Bitaxes that everyone likes so much towards something a little bit bigger. The idea is to do this to keep it very affordable. It should be a cheap heatsink, but it's just going to be better and more capable, a little bit bigger. Some people on other miners are using like server heatsinks. Those are really cool too, and it's nice because they're a standard, but they're also really expensive. Like you're up into like $15 for your heatsink before you know it. So the thought here was
the coolest part that I've seen with like other heatsinks is on. I'm probably chilling too much on the nerd QX stuff, but PMax, he's using the LGA 1151 socket for all his QX developments. So that's pretty neat because you can just use these old cheap LGA 1151 heatsinks and attach them onto your device. Probably you need some sort of special spacers or stuff like this to make sure that the ASICs have contact with the heatsink. But then it's pretty neat, and that's really nice.
And I've looked around. Maybe he has a different source for it. It'd be cool to see. But the ones I've seen, they're not that cheap. Like we're still talking like $10, $15 for these heat sinks. You know,
Yeah,
the current one we have on the Bitaxe is like $1.
Yeah, but it's
comparison.
you get what you pay for, $1, and that's also the thing why we always do have all these discussions around overclocking, heating, stuff like this. This $1 heatsink is not capable of much. Like the Gamma, barely. If you want to overclock your Gamma, switch your heatsink first, buddy. Don't do it with the standard heatsink.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot of people, probably most people, that don't
Yeah.
overclock. So I think it's nice to have a cheap option. I think that's where we're headed to with the Gamma Turbo, right? Is it's going to be a bigger, better heatsink, but still cheap.
Yeah, hopefully. So that's some good progress on this end.
And you know, one of the cool things is that, I mean, it takes a second, but what we've seen with the Bitaxe is if we come up with a new design for a heatsink, it'll be like tomorrow that like all kinds of sellers on AliExpress have the same exact thing for sale. So I guess we're to the point enough where we're big enough and influential enough that we can just let you know, basically China just run with it, and they'll create a entire industry around it.
Yeah, definitely. It's a funny story.
Yeah, it is a funny story. With is Duncan in here? I don't think he's in here, but
No, he's not in here.
He made his own custom heatsink and shopped it
bitchin'
around some
sink.
places in China for samples, and which he got, and I think they look really good, and he ran with it, and I think he's got a great heatsink design. But I think they just stole his design, like straight up. You can just go to other sellers and buy the exact same design.
So I got a custom heatsink. It's going to be made here pretty soon, so we'll see how long it takes to show up outside of my units.
Yeah, this is going to be a cool heatsink. I've seen some pictures of it. Looks like it's going to be great. And it's going to be pretty affordable, right, Ben?
Yeah, it's really not going to change the price much, but it's going to be significantly more performant.
Yeah, 4 mounting points, right? As opposed to just this wobbly 2.
Yep, that's right.
So, you know, we're in the big leagues here now, guys.
We're getting somewhere with this. All right, with that, do we have any questions from the audience?
Any heatsink you do, it will be on AliExpress or Alibaba in 2 days. Yes, and I think that's what we're counting on here, right? Like, you know, the initial idea of going with the little yellow heatsink was like, it's cheap and it's available to anyone on AliExpress, and that way anyone can start building Bitaxes. And I think that was great. But I think, you know, it's, as you might have noticed, it's not ideal. It could be better, but I think we're to the point where if we put the designs out there, other people will just start making them. There's lots of talented folks here. We can sort this out now.
Yeah, just getting a CNC machine and cutting some aluminium, huh?
Let's see, what else do we have? I use it to power the Bitaxe touchscreen. I'm making a new LCD PCB to handle both file. Great, yes. So Ben C98, the creator of the amazing Bitaxe Touch, which just got released and is getting out there. The thing looks fantastic. Sounds like he's using that 5-volt port on the BAP to power it. Yeah, I apologize that it's switching to 12 volt. That's going to be a pain in the neck, but like I said, I don't think it's realistic to put a separate voltage regulator on the Bitaxe just to keep that consistently at 5 volts. And, you know, I think you'll, in the long run, benefit from 12 volts as well, because that means just less current and you'll lose less voltage drop in your connectors. What else? F it. I'm going to do something crazy. Okay. Crypto Ice is doing something crazy. Bitaxe GTIM. Yes. Let's go.
Immersion is always something fun looking at. It's intriguing. It's intriguing, especially like with the one thing that he already did for the usual Bitaxe. It's intriguing to look at. but it's as far as what I can tell from what he told me, it's quite a task to produce multiple of them. Anyway,
Yeah, I
uh,
agree. I agree. There's challenges all around with all the different cooling methods, but let's do them all.
all right, with that, I do think we don't have any more questions. As always, guys, remember, town halls are usually in bi-weekly standard. So unless I don't have any time, we will see us again in 2 weeks. For everybody else who's tuning in into this later on and re-listening this on all these podcast platforms that are out there, I thank everybody for tuning in here. I thank everybody in the audience. It's lovely to see more and more people always tuning in here, and it's lovely to see people that we have seen before in here as well. Huge shout out to you, all of you. It is just amazing being here and being your host. So I thank also Scott and Ben for being here up on stage and just having fun here and talking about all these cool new topics and updates. Till then, I thank everybody for being here, and see you in 2 weeks. Peace out and keep hashing.
Right on.